Hi guys, have you ever wondered whether you should be paying off your mortgage first or investing your money through the stock market? Today I'm going to give you a framework that you can use to make that decision uniquely for yourself. In addition, I'm going to show you what the advantages and disadvantages are of paying off your mortgage first versus investing through the stock market, or whether you should be doing both in your own personal situation. My name is Ken of the Humble Penny and Financial Joy Academy, and what we do on this channel is to give you the tips, the insights, and the practical hacks to help you work towards a dream life of financial independence and money joy. So let's dive straight in and unpack which way you should be going and how exactly you should be making that decision in order to suit your own personal circumstances. We recently made a video called How We Paid Off Our Mortgage in 7 Years, and that video proved to be really popular. And I think it proved to be popular because for a lot of people, paying off a mortgage is quite a big deal. But when you Google on the internet, should you pay off your mortgage off early or invest, a lot of the experts out there would focus on the need to do complex mathematical calculations in order to prove that investing through the stock market is exactly what you should be doing. A lot of them will say things like, oh, you can make an 8% return. Why on earth would you want to be paying off a mortgage with such low interest rates? You should instead be investing your money through the stock market and making a load of returns, okay? Today I want to take a slightly different view, okay? I want to kind of zoom out a little bit and look at this idea of paying off your mortgage versus investing from my own experience and from the realities of life, which are that, to be honest, life never carries on a straight line, and past performance never really informs future performance, okay? So I'm going to now move across to the side and get onto my board and kind of start to unpack. I'm going to zoom out a little bit to kind of explain a framework that you can start to use in order to analyze or assess this decision for yourself in order to make the right decision for your own circumstances. So guys, the way to decide whether you should pay off your mortgage first or whether you should invest through the stock market or do both is to start by looking at two main things. So the first one is to look at what your objectives are, which are your kind of long-term objectives or goals, okay? And the second is to consider your personal circumstances, which essentially is, where are you on a day-to-day basis? What's life like at the moment? What's your state of health? What's your job situation like? What's your current level of savings? All of that stuff, okay? These two combined together tell a much bigger story. So let me zoom out a little bit and explain what I mean exactly. So your objectives fit into a much bigger framework that I personally refer to as your POST, post, if you want to remember this easily, which stands for your purpose, objectives, so this one here feeds here, okay? Strategy, I'm going to explain in a second, and tactics. So your purpose is the why. So why does paying off your mortgage or investing matter? Okay, why does it even matter at all? From almost kind of a higher perspective, okay? That's the why question. Your objectives is your what, okay? What is the long-term goal that feeds from your current purpose or the kind of thing you're trying to aim for in your life, okay? What goals feed from that? I'll give examples just to make this real, okay? Strategy is how you're going to achieve those objectives or goals, okay? How exactly you're going to do it. And your tactics are what steps you're going to take, okay? So it's essentially your tactics are your how exactly, is your strategy is your how. Tactics could also be viewed as the steps you're going to take in order to achieve those set goals, okay? So let's give a hypothetical example. Let's say your purpose is to, live a good, healthy and fulfilling life without any money worries, which, who wouldn't want that? Most people would love that, right? You and I would love that. Imagine that was your purpose. Your objectives might be to become financially independent, or to have the option for early retirement, or to have some financial security, whatever. And we'll define these in a second, okay? Now, your strategy, and this is where investing in the stock market versus paying down your mortgage, for example, come in, because paying off a mortgage or investing through the stock market are levers for achieving a set goal. They are aspects of a strategy for achieving a particular goal, okay? And now the tactics based on what strategy you choose are then the various things you start to do, such as increasing your savings rate, budgeting, all those things that we all find a challenge, but in some ways must do in order for us to achieve our goals. So that framework essentially helps us almost set a scene for how we approach answering this question. Remember, this is about you and making it real in your life, okay? So it's about your objectives, your personal circumstances, and how that fits into a much bigger picture of your why and the thing you're trying to achieve. So let's zoom in now and go into some real examples, kind of unpack exactly how we apply this so that you can use this framework in order to answer these questions for yourself. Okay, so guys, let's look at an example here. So in this example, we've got a couple who are both 35. It's a hypothetical, right? So they're both 35, married with 2 kids. They've got some decent salaries and they're currently healthy, okay? So this is their current circumstances. Remember I talked about their current objectives, long-term objectives, and their current circumstances. So these are their current circumstances. And let's say part of their current circumstances is that they are currently at the stage of financial stability on the money journey. So here's the money journey, an extract of the money journey, okay? So financial stability, financial security, financial independence, and it carries on, okay? Now, and below this, by the way, is financial solvency, a stage where you're basically paying your bills each month and paying debts, but basically you've got no savings at all. So let's say this couple are at the stage of financial stability where they've got 3 to 6 months worth of savings, and that's all they've got. They've got decent jobs, they've got some kids, and they're healthy, and they're 35, yeah? Question is, should they be paying off their mortgage, or should they be investing through the stock market? Now, how I would look at this would be to say, well, these guys, they've only got 3 to 6 months worth of savings now. Whilst that's really, that's good. Most people refer to that as the emergency fund. That's good. I personally would look at this and say, well, actually, I would say that the next logical goal should be to try and get themselves closer to a place of financial security where they have at least about 1 year worth of liquid funds available. Those liquid funds could be available in, say, a savings account or invested through the stock market in the form of, say, index funds or ETFs, for example, but they have elements of liquidity because they've got kids, right? Things could happen, right? But they need those funds for all kinds of things. Beyond just having emergency, they need some level of security. Now, say that couple had gotten to that stage and had goals of one day becoming financially independent, right? They could carry on investing through the stock market. Or at that stage, remember we talked about strategy, they could detour and start paying off their mortgage, okay? Now, the extent to which they choose to do this will depend on what their feelings are around what they see the future looking like and what they prioritize in their futures. So look at this example. Let's say I added the element that this couple are now hating their jobs and want to start their own business, okay? Let's just say, right? Making this up. Right, they're working, jobs are going okay, but these guys they're millennials and they're thinking, do you know what? I'm not picking on millennials, by the way, because I am one of them. They're thinking, do you know what? I actually want to have the opportunity to start my own thing. A lot of people want to start their own businesses, and for good reason, okay? Now, at that stage, they would have to rethink what that strategy is that they are pursuing. Should they carry on investing through the stock market, buying up various things? And remember, with the stock market only really works for you if you have a long-term horizon. And depending on what strategy you pursue, so for example, whether you pursue a passive investing strategy. We've done a video previously on how to invest through the stock market for beginners. I'll put a link to it below or above for you to check out. Make sure you watch that if you want to kind of get started on that path. But for this couple, they would have to really think and ask themselves, is our current strategy that we were employing of investing through the stock market still working for us? Or should we aim to pay off our mortgage such that we can gradually start to maybe, start to work part-time, for example, or maybe start to, one of us could maybe quit on our jobs and start to invest in the business, okay? So my point to you here really about deciding whether you invest through the stock market or pay off your mortgage is a very personal one, really driven by where you are currently on the money journey, i.e. your current circumstances as well, your life circumstances and your current financial position, and then also what your long-term objectives are. Where is it you're going, and what strategy do you think is best for you to employ in order to achieve your goals? So pick me, for example, okay? We actually did both, okay? We did not just focus on paying off the mortgage and that's it. That's all we're doing. No, because we wanted to have this element of the stock market running, but employing a passive investing strategy. We did this where we knew we had a decent level of savings put aside. So we had financial security, and then we said, okay, well, you know what? A big part of what we want to do really is to run our own thing, pursue passions, start our own side hustles, and keep working for those to become proper businesses, where we might then have the option to do whatever we want because we would have complete control of our time. So our strategy was that we saw the mortgage as the low-hanging fruit, the thing that we could get hold of, because with this, investing through the stock market, you needed at least about 20 years really to start to see it really work for you. For those average return rates that everybody talks about, the 7%, the 8%, to see those really coming through for you. You need a really decent horizon. But with the mortgage, we thought, well, do you know what? If we really focused on overpayments and the various things I mentioned in the mortgage video, which I'll put a link to below if you didn't catch it before earlier in the video, is we knew that we could do this in about 10 years. We ended up doing it in 7 years. And so the mortgage became the better strategy for us based on our personal circumstances, okay? Now, the choice of paying off the mortgage has many advantages and disadvantages, which I'll cover. And the choice of heading via the stock market and focusing on the stock market also has many advantages and disadvantages. But I hope this is giving you some perspective into kind of how you might be able to think about this, because it's not just a clear-cut, oh, come on, of course you should invest through the stock market because that's the logical thing to do. No, it's entirely down to your circumstances. Where do you stand and what are your goals? What are you trying to achieve in your own personal life circumstances? And how does that then inform what strategy you employ, because you know what your goals are, your objectives, and what tactics, how exactly steps you need to take, those daily steps you need to take in order for you to then get closer towards achieving your goals, okay? So just to summarize real quick, you can only focus on just investing through the stock market, and you can only focus on just paying off your mortgage, or you can do both, but all driven by the state of your current personal circumstances and the state of your long-term goals. So let's now dive in and start to look at what the advantages are of paying off your mortgage and the disadvantages versus the advantages and disadvantages of investing purely through the stock market. Okay, so let's now look at what the advantages and disadvantages are of actually paying off your mortgage, okay? So, because I've been there, I can tell you, right? Now, I'm a bit, what's the word? What am I looking for? Hang on.
A few moments later.
Yeah, that's it. Biased because I invested by paying off the mortgage whilst also doing the stock market. But I have this huge kind of preference for the mortgage, and I'll tell you why, right? Now, I don't know anybody who's mortgage free who is not happy, right? Listen, that's why I put happy here as part of the pros, right? Overall, and I explain these in line by line, overall, being mortgage free feels good, right? It feels good, right? So look, pros, freedom and peace, right? You just enjoy freedom because you just feel like you've just got this massive weight away from your life. You know, for me, for example, as a family man with my wife, my kids, just nice to know you've got your own home, the place you can call your home. You can do all the traveling you want, and we love to travel, but we have a home, right? So we can come back to that home whenever we want. Okay, so you've got that peace and freedom. Next is risk taking, because when you're mortgage free, people don't muck about with you anymore, right? You can take a bit more risks in your life. You can move on from one employment to another if you wanted to. You can take some more time off work if you wanted to. Okay, so you can take a bit more risks. You can, and I'll cover this below as well. Your goal for financial independence is a lot lower, because think about it. Most people's expenses are typically made up, I'd say at least 30 to 50% of it's typically made up of their housing costs. Okay, so if you haven't got housing costs anymore, then your typical regular essential expenses are a lot lower. And if you go by, say, the 4% rule, even, for example, the target you need to hit to become financially independent becomes a lot lower. If you haven't seen our video on how much money is enough, i.e. how you can work out your financial independence number, look in the link below or above and make sure you watch that to kind of understand what I mean. So the barrier for becoming FI is a lot lower if you don't have mortgage costs, because all you typically have would be housing related costs such as lighting, heating, the internet and what have you. Okay, now you can pursue your passions and businesses if you have an interest in these things. I'm hugely passionate about business, side hustles, have a huge interest in these and see them as massive levers for helping anyone accelerate this journey of becoming financially independent if that's what they want. Okay, but getting rid of that mortgage really gives you the real opportunity to do that, because you've got no other excuse. You're not having to worry about being kicked out of your home. You just go out there and make things happen. Okay, so you can pursue your passions and goals, and all together, you have the opportunity to create more wealth. Because if you think about it, if you're still working, all your income can then go towards other asset classes, more liquid asset classes, such as investing through the stock market, or even investing in a business asset or investing in other property assets if they generate some passive income for you. Okay, cons or disadvantages would be liquidity, because you've got a great deal of your money invested in your property. You would then be, you have all your eggs in one basket in a sense. But that's not necessarily true, because you remember in the previous sections of this video, I mentioned to you that, my preference would always be to kind of get to a decent level of financial stability. So kind of have at least 1 to 2 years worth of expenses saved, and then focus a great deal of your disposable income on perhaps overpaying your mortgage if you saw that to be a credible strategy for your own personal life circumstances. So the con of paying off your mortgage is that you've got wealth concentration. Okay, now I've put this last one here because just for fun, right? Because what happens when you get to a point where people know that you might have paid off your mortgage is that you start to get a lot more people just kind of interested in asking you for money. Okay. I think that's probably the most polite way of putting it. The word's not haters. I just put that there for a bit of fun. But essentially, you have people who either love what you've done, or people who are kind of, dare I say, just slightly jealous. Or people might not quite like it, or some people might look at it and say, wow, that's so inspiring. Okay, so we've had the opposite, which is that people have said to us, wow, that's just so mind-blowing. How on earth did you do it? Which is why we're making all these series of videos to kind of show people what we've done, okay? But overall, you can see here, as I've put here, you are overall happier. There are way more pros than there are obviously cons of paying off your mortgage. And let's not forget, you also get an investment return, obviously, because you're saving a ton of interest. You're saving so much more, which I've covered in the mortgage video before. I just didn't want to go into that in this one, because you've focused on paying off your mortgage. Now, let's look at the stock market and look at what the pros and cons are of focusing on investing purely through the stock market. Okay, so Now, I'm a fan of investing and I talk about investing a lot, and I'm an investor myself. Now, but there are pros and cons that are really important for me to make sure that you fully understand if this is going to be your chosen path, okay? So let's look at the pros first. Pros are that depending on what you're investing, you're more likely, if you invest through the stock market, you're more likely to have a lot more liquidity compared to if you invested in property, say if you paid off your mortgage, okay? You're more likely to have liquidity. But again, this depends on what you're investing, because there are complex areas of investing that don't have as much liquidity. Okay, so for example, if you invested in non-listed companies, or if you invested in venture capital trusts or whatever, okay, they might not have quite as much liquidity as you might do if you invested passively, say through index funds or ETFs or via a passive investing strategy, okay? But let's just call it a pro that you do have a lot more liquidity compared to, say, investing by paying off your mortgage, okay? Now, wealth growth potential is a lot higher if you did it via your pension, because in the UK, for example, you get top-ups, whether you're a basic rate taxpayer or a high rate taxpayer. If you're a high rate taxpayer, for example, you might get 40p for every 80p that you put in. So if you put £80, for example, you get a top-up of £20 through the government. You can then claim another £20 via your tax returns, for example. Okay, so the same applies to a basic rate taxpayer, but except you only get 20% rather than 40%, okay? So that means that if you did invest through your pensions, for example, via a self-invested pension plan, via a SIP, you have the potential actually of almost giving yourself this leveraging power, because you're getting a lot more bang for your buck. And then if you invested that money, you have great potential for it to grow over time. But remember, obviously, you don't get taxed on that immediately, but on your way out, when you come to have access to that money, which we'll talk about as a con later on, you will pay taxes. Obviously, you pay 25%, you get 25% tax-free, and the rest you pay tax on, depending on what your tax rate is at that time when you come to withdraw at the age of 55, based on today's kind of rules, okay? So, next is that it's tax efficient. You can do tax efficient investing through the stock market, either through your ISA or through your SIP, and stuff like that. There are other accounts as well that you can use, but those are just two of them. So you can have tax efficient investing, and you have potential for great returns, okay? So we have people talking all the time about 8% returns, 7% returns, typically kind of pre-inflation and so on. Those rates of returns on average, remember they are averages typically over a period of time, can happen, they can happen, but they are not guaranteed, as we'll cover in a second, okay? So you can generate good returns provided you've got a long enough horizon, okay? So I'm talking here 15 years, 20 years, you've got a really good horizon. It's far more likely, probability-wise, that you might hit those returns if you have a long-term horizon. But remember, to the cons, it's not guaranteed. And this is where it really matters, okay? Because with a property, if you become mortgage-free, you're mortgage-free. You've got it, right? But it's not guaranteed with the stock market. And I have to tell you that. As much as it's great for me to tell you to invest your money, it's not guaranteed. But the strategy you pursue, for example, a passive investing strategy, makes it far more likely that you will be ahead rather than behind or losing money when time passes, okay? Access, this is important, right? So this liquidity point I mentioned with property earlier also can apply to investing through the stock market if you do it through a pension, for example. Because with a pension, I'm 35, I'm going to be 36 very soon. I can't access my pensions till I'm 55, okay? But, I want to live a particular life already. And, I'm kind of thinking, that's kind of money just parked away, okay? So the same would probably apply to you. You can't access that money for quite some time. Although you can invest through, say, your stocks and shares ISA and have a lot more access to your money doing it that way. Now, you need a long-term horizon, as I mentioned before, required for you to see those returns, okay? And it can be potentially expensive depending on how you invest. So today, you and I have a lot more transparency because the technology lets us do that, and because innovators have created products that are a lot cheaper for you and I to invest in. But fees remain a really big burden to invest in through the stock market, okay? Because you will have to generate a return that far exceeds the cost of investing your money, so the fees and various things you have to pay out, okay, in order for you to start to see those potential returns, okay? Whereas with a property, you're getting your returns as you are paying off that mortgage, okay? So you can see that as much as there are really good advantages for investing your money through the stock market, there are also some disadvantages that you must consider, okay? So there you have it. Now, just to summarize what we've just covered, paying off your mortgage and investing through the stock market are both forms of investments. One is through property and one is through investing through the stock market into companies, okay? Typically. Now, both will generate you various forms of returns, and the path you choose depends on your personal circumstances, your day-to-day circumstances, and your long-term goals. Both options are not mutually exclusive, i.e. you don't have to just choose paying off your mortgage only or choose just investing through the stock market only. You can actually mix and match them, and that's what we've been able to do on our own personal journey of not just paying off our mortgage, but also continually investing consistently in an automated fashion through the stock market. I hope that's been really helpful in helping you decide whether you should be investing through the stock market or paying off your mortgage, or a combination of both. I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Are you focusing on just paying off your mortgage, or are you doing a bit of both? How did you come to that strategy for your own personal circumstances? If you are completely new to deciding which way to go, please let me know also in the comments if this video has helped you to clarify which way you should be going. Please like this video if you really enjoyed it, and subscribe if you're new to this channel. We publish every Tuesday and Thursday. Hit the notifications button and you'll be notified as soon as our videos go live. Thanks again for watching, and take care for now. We'll see you on our next video. Bye bye.